This is Mikey calling in from Finland. We're going all around the world today. Germany, Australia, now we're at Finland. What's going on, Mikey?
Yeah, what's up? Hello, Erin and
Hi.
Dan.
Yeah, what's going on today?
About the last call. Well, never mind. I think you want to get on with the show. So,
Sure.
I just wanted to ask, Dan, you have been talking about antinatalism. So,
Yes.
Can you please define the term and then what's your thoughts on it? And Erin, if you can continue on from that.
Yeah. Well, so it's something I guess I'm the only ACA host that talks about antinatalism. So I get all the antinatalism questions. In fact, I'd say as far as the emails I get just as much emails about antinatalism, probably more so than any other topic almost. I mean, like I get a lot of emails about people trying to talk about beliefs and stuff like that, but specific subjects like antinatalism seems to come up. I guess, like I said, I'm one of the only guys talking about it. But, I define it as it's a rejectionist philosophy. Okay. And it's this idea that when you are the choice to give birth is an ethical one, ultimately, at the end of the day. Like, hey, been talking about veganism a little bit, right? Eating animal products is an ethical choice that you could make, whether you decide to do that. Same thing with birth, right? Birth is an ethical choice. So whether or not, you choose to make that decision, for me, I consider it an unethical choice. Okay. For me to, give life. And that seems kind of radical, but, I have a couple different arguments as to why. One is, ultimately it comes down to, I want to bring the least amount of suffering I can into the world. I want to lessen the amount of suffering. And if I'm bringing a new life into the world and there's a potential, not only is there a potential for suffering there, but I have to distribute my resources to that person, or somebody has to distribute resources to that person in order for them to have the best life that they can. And so if I'm giving birth to that, again, potential for suffering, if something catastrophic goes wrong, if I die or something, or my presumably partner in that situation dies. I don't know if it's a partner, maybe I'm in a poly family or something. I don't know, whatever. Things can go wrong that are out of my control. But also, like, if it's not going to be me giving my time, it's going to be somebody else. And so that's resources, that's food, that's time, that's energy that gets put into this, that could be used for other things. Now, I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but in the United States, we have lots and lots of kids in the foster care system. So many kids that could have all be solved tomorrow for anybody that wanted to adopt kids, and wanted to, or wanted to have kids, chose to adopt instead of having kids on their own. And so it's my belief that it's more ethical to adopt if you really want to have kids than to have kids of your own, because again, like you're taking somebody out of that system. It's a better distribution of the resources that we have, and you're making what I would consider the ethical choice in that scenario. This is just my thoughts off the cuff, of course. I thought about writing more cohesive stuff about it, but there's a great book by Ken Coates that talks about it that you can find on Amazon about kind of the history of antinatalism. Kind of really goes back to Buddhist philosophy even, and goes from there. But yeah, I guess that's my take in summation, my sloppy take on antinatalism. So there you go. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. And I think I lost half of it because I think my connection is a bit wonky. But so does your take on antinatalism include only yourself or also other people? Yeah, so great question. Like, I mean, ethics ultimately involves other people, right? And so it would be unwise of me to say that we should enforce some sort of state policy that says everybody can't have children anymore. One, I don't think that's practical, because people have children sometimes when they don't even mean to, but also that it's not popular. It's way not popular. So many people want kids, and it's not only is it ingrained culturally and encouraged culturally for us to have kids, But there is kind of an instinct in us a little bit too to have kids. That's why we're here. And so, yeah, like it's not that I don't think that having kids is a nice thought in the sense that, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a son or a daughter and have somebody to raise. But there are other ways to kind of do that without giving new life, and that's why I'm a big advocate for adoption, although the process is lengthy. And again, not every family that adopts that kid's necessarily going to go to a great home either. But, we have those kids out there and there is kind of this problem. And I think the solution to that is more people adopting. And I wish people considered adoption as their first choice rather than being the thing that you do when you can't have kids or something. But yeah, it's out there. It's a take that's out there. I don't know if it's growing or if it stayed the same. I don't know. As secular nations, we tend to have a declining rate of birth compared to developing nations, and even Japan at some points in recent history has had a negative decline in birth because of our lifestyle and our freedom of choice, and realizing that, hey, we can have careers and not have kids and just live our lives just fine. So maybe we'll see more of it in the future. I don't know. But if you're having trouble listening to this now, Mikey, you can always watch the video recording and hear what I have to say about it. So does that satisfy your question?
Well, yeah, no. Well, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind me taking over your show, what does Erin think?
Right, of course. Yeah, what time is it? Like 4:00 in the morning in Finland right now? Like I can't even imagine what hour you're calling me from.
Something like that. Something like that. Yeah.
Can I make a couple comments on that?
Make some comments. Make some comments, Erin.
This is one topic that I wasn't even aware of. Like I do have kids.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 kids. But since hearing a lot of the arguments that are made for it, I think that it's a controversial topic that needs to be at least put out there so people can make informed decisions, because I think I would have no way to prove this, but I feel like most people who have kids haven't heard the arguments. They're not making the decisions thinking that they're making an ethical decision. They're just going, like what you said, Dan, just kind of going through that the life phases, or you do this and then the next you do this. So
right.
I have to say, like, I had heard that argument before, or maybe I wouldn't have, because I was still, a pretty strong believer at that time. Maybe that would have gone against something in me there. But even that, I feel like that's like they could be easily harmonized. But since I don't plan on having any more kids, and I think a part of that is because now I'm aware of this argument, and so there is definitely a need for the conversation to happen and for people to at least hear the arguments before they make the decision.
Yeah, I feel like I can't justify the action of having kids without having a reason that's selfish in one way or another. Like, oh, I want something that looks like me, or I want to have that experience.
Yeah, and honestly, when I think about having my kids, I'm like, oh, like what? When I had my kids, like they were all reasons that had nothing to do with ethics.
Yeah.
So it's like. Of course, I have to disclosure. I love them, and I would do anything for them. I'm so glad I have them, but I had never even considered it before.
Yeah, I talked about this with Shannon Q one time. This wasn't on the show. This was off the air, and she was really grilling me. She was trying to say like, "Oh, so do you think it was bad for me to have kids?" And it was just like, no, because I don't think that you understood things in the same way that I'm explaining to you now. Like, my purpose in this explanation is not to play the blame game with people, because humans have been doing this for as long as we've existed. It's understandable why people have kids, but understanding the philosophy that I have now and just the reasoning abilities that I have, I cannot compel myself to have kids and feel okay with that. And I think that there's other people, like you said, Erin, if that knew kind of some of these points, they'd probably agree. Right.
Well, even the people that I've met, like in my circle, so like I used to go to like the women's Bible studies and stuff, and like there's a lot of conversation around kids and people planning on having children, and I can tell you that I don't think it was ever brought up once, and that's a huge group of women who are sitting there conversing with each other. And does it ever come up whether it's ethical to go ahead and go through a pregnancy and have your own kids? It's not even on the agenda. So I think it's interesting to. I wonder how many people compelled by these arguments. I'm not sure. I kind of feel like I don't have much more say in it because I've done what I've done, and I don't plan on having any more. And I'm not sure if that was before. Actually, I'm pretty sure I had just I was two and done before I heard the arguments. But I think that if I could go back 10 years, I'm like, I wonder what would have happened for me if I would have heard those arguments, because I do find a lot of them compelling.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you know, like, at least be aware, at least know that this is a thing, and don't please, by all means, if your kids say, I'm speaking to parents out there, if your kids say they don't want to have kids, please don't pressure them into making a decision that they don't want to make. Yeah,
that's exactly it too. I have two kids. I have a daughter, and I just raising her with the awareness that she doesn't have to actually get married, have kids, and do the whole thing. It's the realizing that there is the option to not do that is something that I didn't realize. So I think it's an amazing kind of conversation to bring up. Like, do you have to get married? Do you have to have kids?
Shame people. We shame people for not having kids. Yeah, absolutely. Try being a young Christian woman. Yeah, be a young Christian woman in this country. And tell your congregation, I don't plan on having kids, and see what their response is. There's going to be at least one person that says it's your godly duty to have kids.
I cannot tell you how many times I was pressured to have more kids. And so for me, I have other reasons why I don't have a whole bunch of kids. I have my own chronic health issues. So for me, the decision to have one was, a lot. The decision to have two was even harder. And you go to church and you go to different women's, and they tell you that, there's a lot of this idea that, like, if you're closing yourself off to having all of the children that God wants you to have,
you're doing something wrong.
You're doing something wrong. And so like, that is on the opposite end of the antinatalism conversation. Like, they actually think that you're doing something morally good by having as many children as you can, because that, it's actually in the Bible to, go forward and multiply. So it's a really important conversation, even if you're not going at it from like an atheistic or anything kind of standpoint. Just bringing up the conversation, like, do you think it's maybe maybe you should adopt or think about adopting first, or like, just is there any like kind of low key ways we can have these conversations be brought up in those ultra conservative environments even?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see. I've never brought it amongst the conservative audience before. I'd have to see what they say. But we have some other calls. I want to get to two more before we get to the end here. Mikey, thanks so much for calling from Finland. Hey, bud, get some sleep, man. I'm worrying about you, dude, because it's probably pretty late over there. So. Well, cool. You have a good one. Thanks again for calling.